part of every project, the one that the clients love to, give attention. So we're going to see how we can make that a little bit better and a little bit easier. So my name is Simon, or Simon if it's easier for you, I don't care. I'm the Director of Technology for Evolving Web, and I'm here with my colleague Dharizza, which I'm going to let her introduce.
Hi everyone, my name is Dharizza Espinach. I am a tech lead at Evolving Web and a lead trainer as well. So nice to see you.
So I'm going to annoy you a little bit with a description of what Evolving Web is doing. You probably don't know the Evolving Web name yet, obviously. We are a major Drupal shop, but we evolved we're now like a full-scale agency. We provide specialty in Drupal, but we also do a little bit of WordPress. We have training programs. Dharizza is our lead trainer. We've trained thousands of Drupal developers and Drupal content editor over the years. We've been part, and we're still part of the Drupal CMS leadership team. One of our secret goals for the next few months is to provide a better developer documentation for Drupal Canvas. So I guess it's going to be helpful for a lot of you folks. All our projects are now strategy driven, and most of our clients are mainly North American, but world-class public sector, healthcare, higher ed, that kind of thing. You can come by the booth and chat if you want to know more. So here's a glance the path we're going to follow. A little bit of a context. We're going to speak about the different kind of testing that we think are useful in the context of maintenance. What Drupal provides out of the box to run tests. I'll explain how we do CI/CD at Evolving Web. It's a little bit opinionated, a little bit interesting. So I think I want to share that. And then we'll see what we use to automate part of the user testing, and Dharizza will do a nice demo. There's no AI. I'm sorry. Thank you very much. Here we go.
Okay, hi everyone. So let's put the story up front. So it was a Tuesday, normal Tuesday for all of us, very sunny, hopefully. So it's nice. We have the routine maintenance window, right? We have done it 100 times. We have a module to update, maybe a couple of modules to update. We update that locally. We run drush updv. We export configuration. We clear the cache. We check the site. Everything looks nice, right? All good. We deploy. All good. Quickly check in production later on. Everything seems to be working perfectly. Okay, normal, right? So far. Okay. It was a small update. Or so it seemed. There was just a minor version bump into the views reference module, and it was all good. In theory, there was no breaking changes in the changelog, except that now there is actually a page that is no longer displaying the news releases of the site. And then we didn't really see it. Nothing really failed. There was just silence, right? But the bug was there. It was silent. It was invisible because we only checked a couple of pages in our smoke test. And it was up until 1 or 2 days later that the content manager came up to us, the client freaking out. I had to release something today. I created the content and it is not showing up in the news releases. And it is not just that one is not showing up. No news releases are showing up. So this is painful, right? What happened? Well, we look at it. We checked some pages. It was working fine. The cache, we revealed cache just in case. Everything is fine. Everything everywhere else except there. So what really happened here? It's all gone. It is silent. It is expensive as well. There were no automated alert that was fired up because everything was working fine. So what happened here? before we talk about that, raise your hand if you have shipped code you knew wasn't fully tested because there was no time. Right? Okay. Keep your hand up if you have done that in the last 6 months.
Yeah, be honest, be honest.
We can be honest. There is no judgment here. It's perfectly fine. That's what we're here, right? Almost, there's a lot of hands that will be up at this point, right? Including ours. We have. Because there's no time a lot of the times. So we just have to go with what we have, time and resources that we have. This is not a talk about judgment. It is just that we have all been that team and we want to improve that situation, right? What do we do about it? We know for sure this is not a skills problem because the teams know how to actually write tests, for example. The issue is that most of the times the maintenance work is underfunded, right? Money is there for new features. The new features actually get a sprint, they get a specs, they get all the budget, they get everything, right? We even have design reviews for them. But maintenance, we'll see next quarter. And automated testing, let alone that. We'll see when things calm down. Except that things never really calm down, right? So the natural instinct is to say, oh, the problem is that we need more resources. We need to hire more people. We need more time for QA. And while that might be true in some cases, it is not true all the time. This getting more people doesn't really scale. As the site grows, the surface area for regression issues also grows. So manual testing gets more expensive, it gets slower, and we still have those silent, quiet failures happening. So a visual regression tool is something that will have caught the issue with the news releases page in under 2 minutes, right? So let's fix that. Let's actually see how the tools that we have help us, right? By the end of the session, hopefully, we will have everything we need to go back to our team and build this. So now, we'll have some on.
Yeah, and we know there's no silver bullet for that, but what we know is like it's always going to be hard to explain what's the value of proper maintenance and continuous testing to our clients because it's very invisible and like it's kind of only us that understand that it's put us in a better place on the long term, but it's really hard to sell the value. So the strategy is more about how can we do more with less, and especially less time and more automated tooling so that we can spend our actual human time on the stuff that is really hard to automate. Let's just go quickly over what I like to see about the 3 tiers of like the 3 different areas of testing, which I dubbed the tiers of confidence. The first is like the safety net, like everything you can check at the code level only without running the full system. So you can think about the tools like PHP code sniffer, PHP stan, all the linters that are going to look at, your JSON file, YAML file, twig file, and quickly check for obvious mistakes, deviations from your coding standards, and the likes. You can run them early in the process. They're quick, they're fast, and as an example, here is like quickly spotting that you're using a filter in your twig file that is not declared or that your system doesn't know about. There's no need to deploy that. It can be caught up very, very early. The next level is to test an actual running system, a fully bootstrapped Drupal, including your code change. And then on those, an actual human can go and test. So think your QA team. But you can also start doing some automated testing, like unit testing, integration testing, functional testing. We'll talk about it later. But also visual testing, mainly by allowing you to compare the state of the system you are about to ship with the well-known working state, like your production system, for example. One example can be that, which is that's an example of an actual test we run using Playwright, and you can play the game of the n differences. I don't know how many there are. There's an obvious one, but you can see that if an actual QA resource, like an actual human being would just stare at the right side, the new thing, it's very hard to kind of cognitively spot that something changed. If you have both sides, it gets easier. And we'll see that there's actually a tool that automates that comparison to just quickly spot at a glance what are the pages that changed and check if it's expected or not. And the last year is more about monitoring the long-term trends. How is the overall performance metrics, how they're trending over time. So for example, the page load time, the error rates, they're useful to detect like those changes in the trends and tie them to specific changes you made to the code. So examples of that category are, for example, New Relic, that are going to be monitoring constantly your production system. And by analyzing the data, you're going to be able to say, oh, something changed at that date. I'm going to be able to go back at my changelog and figure out if I changed something at that point. It's not going to be really the topic of that talk. We'll focus on the first two. So I'm going to give it back to Dharizza, and we're going to see what Drupal provides out of the box to run tests.
Thank you. Okay, so now that we have gone through that, the question is not really if the tool exists to fix this, right? But which one to use. So in Drupal, out of the box, we have different tools. So the Drupal test set is built on PHP unit, and it is organized on 3 tiers. So the first one is unit tests, then we have kernel tests, and then we have functional tests with a variant for functional JavaScript tests. For unit tests, these are the fastest. They test a single class or a single method in isolation. No dependencies at all, no databases there, no Drupal is bootstrapped, right? Not at all. Then we have kernel tests. These actually sit in the middle. They actually bootstrap Drupal, but it is just a partial Drupal environment. We do have a real database, and the kind of things that we can test with kernel tests are actually hooks, entity operations, maybe some service integrations that we have, but without spinning a full website, right? And finally, functional tests. These ones go all the way. So we have a full installation, we have real HTTP requests, and we have real page responses, right? Inside of this one, we have the functional JavaScript category. For these ones, we actually add a browser on it. So we have a Chromium browser for anything that needs JavaScript to run in there. It is important to know that each of these stages trades speed for realism. So the trick is knowing where in the spectrum our problem lives, right? We know those are the 3 types, but when do we use each one? The honest answer is use the lightest one that can drastically catch the bug that you're worried about. So if you're worried about a custom field formatter that needs to do a string transformation, then write a unit test for confirming that that string transformation is done correctly. If what worries you is that a hook fires correctly after an entity is saved, then for this one, you can go with a kernel test, right? You don't need this in isolation, but you don't need the full bootstrap. You need the full environment. If what you are worried about is an editor filling out a form and then the right content showing up on the page, that is functional, right? We want to make sure an action happens and we get certain result. So we go with functional tests. And if any of that actually involves JavaScript interaction, like we have a dropdown that is populated with Ajax or something like that, then we will go with the functional JavaScript. Most of the times, what the failure that we see is that people is trying to reach for functional tests for every single thing. So you're killing an ant with an atomic bomb, right? That's not what we need. So a lot of the times, all we need to do is just find where in that spectrum we are and then go with that type of test. The starting point for each of these is specific, okay? It will depend on the type of test that you're working on. Every test type is going to have a different base class, and that makes Drupal know what is the type of environment that it needs to set up for you. If you extend a unit test case, then basically you will get a blank PHP unit environment, no Drupal. Everything just for you to test your isolated code. The kernel test base boots just enough of Drupal so that you can run what you need, even with the modules that you need for that case. The browser test base goes the whole way. It has a full installation, as we have mentioned. It actually have a real test site spun up in memory, and there are real HTTP requests that you can make to it. And finally, WebDriver base is actually extending the browser test base, but it has a Chromium instance attached to it. So the pattern is consistent across all of them. And again, you don't need to configure all of this manually. You can just get started based on any of those base classes. In some cases, we want to know how to get data into the tests, right? We want to make sure our tests are self-contained and repeatable, and they don't change depending on our schema, right? So sometimes we want to have some background information, but we don't want that background information to be depending on the actual real data. So we can set that up using the setup modules that all of those classes have. That allows us to set up that environment. And Drupal also has traits, a lot of traits that allow us to create different stuff. For example, the node creation trait allows us to create nodes with based on data in an array. Same with the user creation trait and many others, okay? So we don't really need anything else. All we need to do is work with those traits, set up the background information for each of them, and run it. Great. We know what are the type of tests. We know how to work with them. But what do we test? Well, we will test our code. We don't really need to test somebody else's code. Only our code and our team's code. Why? We do not need to test Drupal core. Core has its own tests. Contrib, same thing. They have their own tests. The community already does all of that. And if they don't, then that's a problem for the issue queue that we can help on, but it shouldn't live inside of our own project. What we are responsible for is the code that our team writes. So our custom modules, our custom plugins, the business logic that we create. Because that's the thing that doesn't really have a safety net. So that's what we need to work with. About the contrib and core thing, if you discover a bug in a contrib module and you fix it, that's great. But best idea will be to contribute that back to the community. And when you create that patch, make sure you also include tests for it. That's actually the reason why Drupal has so much coverage everywhere, right? A patch is not merged until it has tests attached to it. So the contrib updates are important to have them that way instead of having them just in our environment, and also instead of having a fork, because later on it is difficult to maintain and nobody remembers what the fork was for. We also need to think about this. We don't need to aim at 100% coverage, right? Not everything needs a test. The best way to think about it is more like what is the thing that will be very problematic if it breaks? Or, for example, what are the things that we are doing, that we are testing manually every single time before the deployment? If there is a flow that we have to do every time before the deployment, then chances are you should write a test for it, okay? Finally, run the tests. And this might sound obvious, but there is a lot of cases where there is even a decent test suite in projects, but they're just not run. They haven't been run in months. So it is important that we actually run them. And it is not that difficult if you're using ddev, for example. That is the command, ddev exec, and then you use the PHP unit bin and just pass the path and you will be ready, okay? But if you want to make it even easier and more accessible for your developers, you can even create a custom command in ddev with that. And once we're sure it is running locally, we can make sure as well we integrate that into the pipeline. And that's the part that we're going to go through next.
Thank you, Dharizza. So we're going to speak about pipelines, which is a hot topic in the news these days, but I digress. Not those pipelines. Everyone knows what pipelines, everyone knows, like most of you probably knows what a CI/CD system is, what pipelines are. Everyone is accustomed to the triple dev test production environment in our hosting environments. That's I'm not going to try to convince to use that. It's well known. Just going to try to give you a little bit of what's our opinion on how to use those and how we do that at Evolving Web. Basically, the journey of a code change. What's really important, like something we really want to enforce in our projects, is really to always test on a separate environment, an ephemeral environment that is not going to be one of those three long-running and stable environments. Rule of thumb for me is dev is not an environment on which you try to test unfinished work. And I might try raise your hand if you already pushed unfinished work to the dev environment, and I'm going to raise my hand first because I've been guilty of that in the past for a long time. It used to be that, but we now have the tools to do it in a cleaner way. Think of it like dev is where the latest version, the latest running version of what your dev team is producing lives. Test is where the client sees the upcoming release and they can do something that is more stable and they can test it before it goes live to production. If your dev environment is broken because you're using it as a place where you fine-tune your work, and suddenly a major security update happens, then you're going to be in a pickle because you're going to have to figure out how to roll back a bunch of stuff and have a clean pipeline. A nice metric you can monitor is what is the number of days you have between the different releases of your last three pipelines, and you should try to have that to shorten that as much as possible. We're using GitLab mainly at Evolving Web, so I'm going to make all my example around GitLab, but all of that is applicable to GitHub Actions, Bitbucket pipelines, here we're using GitLab CI. So I'm just going to get back, but our pipeline works with three different stages: validate, deploy, and then a review stage that's more for testing. So for all the old timers, if you see validate and deploy, you'll recognize that we've been using BLT for a long time, so everything is tied to that. If you still happen to be using BLT on the Drupal 10 website and you feel you're stuck and want to share everything, come speak to me. We have a solution for that to run BLT on Drupal 11. But that's what it looks like on a typical GitLab CI project at Evolving Web. There's multiple stages, multiple jobs, but those are basically the three stages that I was talking about. You'll notice that the validate stage is completely independent because that's where we run all the tests that are not tied to a running environment. So they're quick and they're always run. And we can always start the deployment process in parallel because it doesn't matter. We don't need to wait for that validation step to be over to start deploying the code. So deploy is all about packaging the code and then pushing it to the testing environment. Here you see Pantheon is mentioned because that specific project leverages the Pantheon multi-dev feature, which is a nice feature. Pantheon are nice people, come and check their booth. They're sponsor of the events. But that could be something like Tugboat, for example, which also are very nice people and you can go and check their booth and speak with them. Upsun provide the same kind of feature. They're also sponsoring the event. They have a booth, come and check them. And it also could be Acquia. Acquia also have on-demand environment, and someone's telling me they also have a booth. You can go and check them out. But also, if you do that, also come and check out our booth, obviously, so that we can get a little bit of traffic too. There's something very important that we kind of changed across the years. Like, once we started to have those automation in pipelines, there was a tendency to run them all the time on every change. Like every time a developer would push a commit on any branch in any circumstances, it would always trigger that whole pipeline. And we kind of scaled that down a little bit to decide that It would be only when we push code to the main branch that is supposed to get to the last stage and goes to the dev test environment that we will run that, or if an MR or PR is open, like a merge request or pull request is open. We consider that if the developer is not opening a merge request, it means that the work is not completely finished yet. There's nothing to test, so there's no need to kind of clog up the CI/CD resources. So we'll see how we do that. Is that moving forward? Yeah, so that's basically what I was saying. Thanks. So as I was saying, everything is around the merge request. So whenever the work is advanced enough and we feel like we should have it running somewhere to test it, we open an MR, even if draft mode, and that's the signal that the work that we're doing on a specific branch is good enough. Building, like triggering the build or the deployment is still considered manual at this stage. You'll see on that merge request, GitLab integrates the pipeline and you see all the different steps. We're going to run the validate stage because it's cheap and we can run it anyway. But the deployment is considered more expensive, so it requires the developer to go and click on a button to trigger it. Sometimes, though, it's useful to be able to opt in to automatically do that because like you're on the late stage of your like fine-tuning the code and you really want everything you push to be automatically triggered. So in order to do that, we leverage GitLab tags on the merge request. So we fine-tune our jobs. If a specific tag is attached to the merge request, then the deployment becomes automatic. So then the developers can choose between something that's manual and on-demand, something that's completely automated. So for that, we leverage the GitLab CI rule systems, which is the most advanced way to configure when and how jobs are supposed to run. So as it defines when a job is actually activated and is part of the pipeline. It also allows to refine the behavior of those jobs depending on the case. So it looks a little bit scary, but I'm going to drive you through that. What you want to look at is the rules section. You see that the script section is like actually very simple because it leverages BLT in the background. What's very important is like all the different rules, and there's like each rule specifies a different case. The first one is what to do if what got pushed is a tag. The next one is whenever we push to the default branch, and so on and so forth. The next one is like if it's a merge request that we want to run automatically, and so on and so forth. You'll notice that it does two things. It sets up the condition when the job should run, but it also customizes the behavior. Sometimes it's when is set up to manual, which means it's going to require user intervention to trigger the job. And in some of the cases, it's on success, which means if the previous stages of the pipeline run successfully, then it's going to be triggered automatically. It also tweaks a little bit the behavior of BLT depending on the case. So that's interesting, but obviously we want to scale that as an agency, and many of you work in like agencies or multi-project at the same time. We want to unify that configuration. So the goal is to have the same on every project we manage, but we still need to handle the slight differences we have on different projects. So there's tend to be an explosion of edge cases and different things we want to fine-tune, but we still want to have one reference configuration to keep it current and then avoid having like bespoke configuration on each and every project. And then when we go back to an old project, we don't have the same tooling as the most recent one. So it tends to be a very big GitLab CI configuration. So if you're already toyed with, like we're already starting to play with the GitLab CI configuration, and well done that, you start using the main GitLab CI YAML, and it tends to be big. So one of the solutions for that is just break that in multiple files. You see on the screen here, it's broken down in multiple files in that repo, and then you use include to kind of consolidate everything. And you can also use that technique you can also provide the default configuration using the variables settings here. What we do in order to consolidate, that's a nice feature of GitLab, but it exists also on other systems. We have a single project that's the reference repository for the CI configuration. And on an actual project, we're going to reference that. You see on the left, the CI configuration of one project is just referencing our canonical configuration. We use branches and the ref keywords so that on a specific project, we can target a specific branch of our configuration. That avoids, like we can make some progress to our common configuration without introducing breaking changes. If we want a new feature on a pipeline, we're going to create a new branch, and each project will opt in when they're ready to integrate those changes. You've seen probably a lot of environment variables all the way. So that's what we use to make our configuration flexible. So when we use the configuration of a specific project, we have to provide those variables. And in order to make it easy, it's just remember there's two cases. You either need to manage, let's say, system settings and secrets, and those are going to go in the GitLab configuration, in the settings of the project. They're kept here, they're not revealed automatically, only project owners can access those, so they're kept safe. And the other variables that are more like project specific or things you need to fine tune along the lifecycle of the project, for example, the PHP version, or whether you want to add additional branches you want to see deployed automatically, you put that in the GitLab CI config so that you can track the changes, or you can have them specific to a branch. So having all of that, like that's the usual and well-known benefits of having a CI/CD. But also what it brings us is the ability to use the CI/CD system to spin up ephemeral environments, and also avoid the thing we're using, avoid clogging up the CI/CD resource that we have, and really make sure we're using it only when we need it. And exposing features such as creating multi-dev environments or tugboat environment in the CI/CD allows developers to do that autonomously without relying on DevOps people, and they don't even need access to the actual hosting platform dashboard or access, so you can even keep that aspect even a little bit more secure. There are cases where we're working on projects where there can be like 10 different developers. It then starts to be a little bit insecure if you let those 10 developers have access to the Pantheon dashboard or the Acquia dashboard, and they can all do some different kind of things on there. And then by sharing the configuration, you can apply that on every of your projects on the platform. So that's about like the underlying technical foundation that we can use to bring more tools to the developers. Now, what about that boring maintenance process that we all have to go through every now and then? Let's talk about what's the anatomy of that process. So what's great is that for a long while already, Drupal adopted Composer, so we're in a better spot when it comes to do module updates or core updates. So it's just about checking if there are any updates, and then apply the updates, right? And jump down. All right? Not really, right? After the code is updated, we need to go and run the update hooks. And then once the update hooks have run, if they run successfully, we're going to have to check if the configuration changed. And then if the configuration changed, we have to re-export the configuration so that we can then commit the change, like the contrib updates or core updates, alongside the configuration change. Otherwise, you're going to just ship the code change, but not the necessary configuration change. You need to push that and deploy to the dev environment and start testing that in order to figure out, like do some smoke testing, remember what are the things that are usually breaking on that website, and confirm everything you've done. And you need to do that every week, or maybe every month, or maybe every quarter, because at that point you get a little bit too burned by the process. How can we make that easier? Let's focus on the very beginning of that process, which is when we check the update and we apply the updates. I want to introduce you to the tool maybe some of you already know, which is called Renovate. It's an open source project. It's on GitHub, and it's awesome. Basically, it checks if there is updates on your project that needs to be applied, and it automatically opens merge requests against your project. So the only thing you have to do is review the update and merge it if everything's okay. It integrates with your source control manager. So if you're using GitLab, it integrates with GitLab. If you're using GitHub, same thing, Bitbucket. It supports almost them all. I've seen it running on Azure DevOps. So it's really supports all of that. It integrates with the package manager. So for Drupal, it's going to be Composer, but it also supports NPM if you're using that for your front end like theme front-end assets. But it also kind of, like, I yet to find a package manager it doesn't support. So even if you have like very esoteric piece of code and I don't know, using Rust and you have to you have to be integrated cargo and that kind of thing, it supports that. And there's no additional UI. It integrates with your existing GitLab and it does everything through merge requests and the existing issues. So you don't have to kind of manage really an additional tool. You just give that script that runs every like 15 minutes or every hour access to your project, so giving an API key. And each time there's a detected update, it's going to open an MR with the change ready to be reviewed. That's the example of an MR that got open when Renovate detected that that project runs on 11.3.3 and 11.3.5 is released. Seems like we skipped one because probably we do it only every month on that project. How does that work? You just provide a renovate.json in the root of your project repository. You give an API access so that Renovate can connect to your project and open merge requests and push commits. And you give rules in order to explain Renovate how you want to group the updates together. Because otherwise, by default, it's just going to open one merge request for each individual updates, which can be Drupal contribs, the core. Core comes with multiple composer packages, so it's going to start to be a lot, and it's going to actually become it's going to consume more time that it's going to save to handle that. So what we do is usually we group for core individually, contribs, so core is going to be on its bucket, all the contribs on a specific bucket. Everything Drush is going to be on a different bucket. Everything non-Drupal is going to be in a dependencies bucket. And whenever there's a major update, it's going to be taken out of those buckets and be treated as a separate merge request, so that we're never going to automatically introduce, obviously, a Drupal major release that's never going to be handled automatically, but also major contribs, major release of contribs oftentimes needs to be reviewed more carefully. So we put them in a specific merge request. Quick glance at the config file. So you see that Renovate even allow you to configure a schedule when you think it's a good time to run that, because if an update's released, obviously Renovate is going to start opening merge requests on all your projects, so you don't want that to happen at 10 a.m. when your developers actually need the CI resources to do actual work. I'm not implying that maintenance is not actual work, don't worry. So that's the general settings, and then you have the rules. So looks a bit scary, but I annotated that, so you'll see that we have a pattern matching system to match what's core, what's contrib, and then sometimes it goes to a group. There's a group name specified, or for example, for major updates, there's no group because each package is going to be treated individually, and there's that nice dependency dashboard approval, which means those we're going to even wait for the developers to give approval before creating the merge request. As I said, there's no UI, so Renovate works by opening an issue in the issue list of your GitLab project. There's going to be a specific issue for Renovate, and it's going to automatically maintain it as long as it runs, and it provides you, at a glance, the state of what's in your project. So what are the updates that are pending approval from the developer to actually create the merge request? What are the updates that exist, but they're going to run only when it's the right time frame, so at night usually? And what are the merge requests that are currently open, and maybe you want to ask Renovate to rebase that because you didn't have the time to look at it, and then it got a bit updated. The nice thing is, like, you just check the box, so it's okay, you just edit the issue description, and when Renovate's going to next run, it's going to just see that you checked some boxes, and it's going to run those tasks. So once all of that is set up, that means you can even ask GitLab to list you all the merge requests that exist for all your projects that are tagged with a specific tag. In that case, we're tagging our projects with that specific update dependency tag. And then you have, at a glance, all the maintenance work that pertains to updating core and contrib, and you know what you have to do without having to clone the project on your laptop, update it, make it run, and then run the composer audit command. But does it really work? Of course it works, but you have to like, is it really working at scale on all your projects? What can happen? Well, the Renovate setup could be broken. Renovate could be stuck in a loop where, I don't know, there's something weird in your composer JSON and you can't really figure out what's happening, so it fails. And another thing that's even more pernicious is like you could be doing all of that job, but everything is stuck either in the dev or the test environment and never goes to live, which means it's almost like you did that for nothing. What you can rely on for that is Drupal has the status page, and one of the item of that status page is about are you up to date or not. You see on that example, Drupal tells us that there's available updates for one or more modules or theme. So the idea is to try to grab that information automatically, so we have a different way of checking the state of the updates that is not relying on GitLab or the codebase or whatnot. So of course, parsing that page is a little bit cumbersome, but Drush to the rescue, you can get all the information of that page as a JSON output, and it's going to have the information about the status of your updates. So then what we do at Evolving Web, like we have a set of recurring scripts that are going to connect to our hosting providers' APIs, build an inventory of all the websites we're hosting, and then leverage Drush to fetch all those the information from the status update as a JSON file and show everything in Notion as a database. Because it's just like the best way to build a dashboard these days, basically. So you see here we have a column where we just show all the raw JSON that comes from Drush. And then we use a couple of, I think it's called formula columns with specific statements here in the like Notion formula language. And then we have a nice status about for core or for contribs, what is the severity? And Drupal gives us a warning severity if there's an update, or an error severity if there's a security update. So that's a nice way to spot at a glance if something's wrong. That's an example. We don't have more than 15 websites with security updates pending. Don't worry. That might be the only example that actually leverages AI, because don't try to understand or to craft those kind of formula yourself. Ask ChatGPT. It's quicker. Well, so now we have automated all of that. We're capable of monitoring it. And I'm going to give it one more time to Dharizza to speak about how we can test it.
Yeah, okay, so...
Are we going to demo?
Okay, yeah. So we have all the automation for making sure that the updates are applied automatically, right? But we will still have the same problem as the beginning. So we will still want to apply, even with the PHP unit test and everything we talked about before, we will still want to have something else that sits on top of all of that, that allows us to catch regression, like visual regression issues. So for doing this, there are different tools out there. I'm going to talk about Diffy specifically. The way in which it works is actually very easy. The mechanics of it is easy. It basically captures screenshots of your pages. It stores that as a baseline. And then, after a change, it can make screenshots of the new version of the site and actually compare that. So it does a pixel level diff of the two screenshots, and then it highlights whatever change that we can see, right? Anything that changes is highlighted. The reason this matters is that it sees the page in the same way as your users see the page. So that's great. It is not just that we see and we think that it looks pretty much okay, but that it actually compares pixel by pixel the differences, right? Sometimes there are some changes that are difficult for us to spot. Maybe we saw it and we thought it was fine, but maybe it was slightly switched or moved to the left, and now that's not okay. Or maybe some text went to a new line, or maybe a box got bigger than the other one. There are many things that could happen, right? So with this, we can catch that. The nice part of it is because it is a software as a platform. It is a service as a software as a service. I forgot. Okay, as it is a software as a service, there is no really platform that you have to deal with, that you have to maintain. Basically, you don't have to manage where to store all the screenshots either. That's also not happening. the only thing that happens is your pipeline makes an API call to Diffy. Diffy does the work, and then it returns some report, right, that you can work with. Now, that's Diffy, but what Diffy is not. We have been talking about different tools, right? Do we need all of them? Well, at the end, yes, you do need all of them. Potentially, you want to create all of the type of tests. Again, you will try to see what hurts more, and then you will create a test for those, and then you will build your test suite over time. But all of these type of tests are doing different things. Playwright scripts, for example, are going to check behavior. So click this, fill that form, check this result, right? You want to test that with Playwright. PHP unit, it is for checking functionality in isolation, as we discussed. But Diffy tests the appearance, okay? And it is not just, does it look okay? Does it actually look as it is supposed to look, right? And then, something else that is great is that it doesn't really require a full QA team to operate it. It actually allows the developers to catch those things before it actually goes to QA, and they create another bug ticket, and then it is sent back to the development. We can see it right in the moment when we create the merge request if we have it if we have it configured in this way. So we get to see about it directly from the MR, from our pipeline, instead of from the QA people, or even worse, from the client. So, great. How do we configure it? What to test? How many things? Okay, Diffy has a page where you can configure what are the pages that you want to be testing. Okay? The real question is that not every page in your sitemap should make it to Diffy necessarily. Again, it is going to cost based on how many pages you have, so that's also something to consider, right? There are other tools that could work for scrapping everything, but we could use this for the top end pages. And this is going to depend on the size of your site. So remember, you're creating a set of pages that cover your site's visual surface area. So if you have a small website, maybe 5 to 10 pages is enough. You choose the most important ones, and that's good. If it's a small site, 10 to 20 pages might be enough. A large or complex website, 20 to 30 pages will be fine. Now, how do we choose them? I like to think about them as templates. So, because it's Drupal, it is easy to think one per content type, right? And that's perfect. If you have 5 content types, you want to test 1 page of each content type. You want to test 10 pages of each content type. Doesn't really make sense. They all follow the same format. So you can choose it that way. But not just that. You also need to think about the other type of templates, let's say, that you might have. Because maybe you have some landing pages, and they have different ways of displaying. Choose based on the type of layouts that you might have, and select them there. You can also think about it as the most important pages, the pages that receive the most traffic. If those break, what will happen? Again, the client is going to freak out because the most important page in the site is down or has something that is not looking correctly. So that is another great candidate for adding to the top pages that will be tested with every change. You can also check pages with the most layout complexity or pages with third-party embeds. We had recently a case where we were updating the content security policy of the website, and the form that was embedded for a subscribe functionality just broke, basically because it was coming from a third party. And when we updated the content security policy, it couldn't land, it couldn't be shown, it was blocked. So this thing allows us to catch that kind of stuff as well, if it is set up in the list of pages to check. There are two moments that matter in terms of when to test this or when to trigger these tests. One of them is on every merge request. So when a developer opens the MR, the pipeline is going to spin up the review environment. It will deploy the branch, as Simon mentioned before, and then it will trigger Diffy. There's going to do a comparison against staging, and if something is shipped visually, it is going to highlight it. So the developer is going to see that before it is actually merged, which is great. That's step one. The other moment is right before we promote to production. So here, we're not necessarily looking for code regressions, but for environment changes, right? Because if we had it on MRs, we already checked for code regressions. But now configuration, database update that haven't been run, a switching environment, that is the kind of things that we will be catching here. And all of these are things that don't show up in the PHP unit tests or in Playwright. So this is a great tool. So let's see the situation. It's Tuesday again. We're doing our regular updates. And we apply it. It all looks okay. We go to the stage environment or local in this case, whatever we want. We see the site. It looks okay, right? Pretty much okay. We see all the elements. Perfect. Just as an idea, we go and I will compare to production just to make sure it's there. Okay, right?
Can you spot the difference?
I will say, is it the same? Is it not the same? Let's see it in Diffy. It was not easy to our eye. It was the same page, mostly. None of us got it. Right? What happens here? Oh. Live demos? Okay, just wait. I have it open somewhere else. But there is way too many things here. So give me one moment. Oh, there is it. Okay, great, perfect.
Can you spot
So,
it?
can you see it there? It's clear, right? The good thing about Diffy, and I'm gonna go back just to the whole thing here. Normally Diffy is going to show you all of the pages, right? And all of those things that are in red or green normally show up gray. Just highlighting there is a change. Well, purple, sorry. So you can get to see there what are the differences and work with them. Ideally, you are going to go through all of those pages and you will choose whether the difference is expected or not. Sometimes it is just a content change and it's all good. Sometimes it is actually a bug. For each of the pages, you get to see a comparison of production and staging. So you can move this to see exactly what's going on. So in this case, you can see there were some differences here, but it was mostly content, so it was marked as all good. And then down here, we can keep going to the next pages. For the example we are talking about, it was this one. And the issue was here. The issue was the breadcrumb. What happened in this case? Basically, the menu breadcrumb module got removed. Easy breadcrumb was added, but easy breadcrumb was not working properly. Sorry. So, in this case, the developer caught a bug because we looked at this. We had the comment in GitLab saying that this is the report. We were able to go and see it. decide what was a bug and what's not, and then fix it, right? We save time before reaching QA. We eliminated the QA to dev bug fix loops. And then we now are more confident about our production deployment. So going back, everything we have covered today, from the Tuesday morning that went wrong with the news releases to this incident with the easy breadcrumbs, is really about one single thing. It is not about perfection. It is actually about the confidence and being able to ship the things with the knowledge that our safety net is in place, and that even those boring tasks have something that is automatically testing and checking things are okay. From static analysis that catches the code mistakes before the code runs, the PHP unit catching the logic errors in the custom code, Diffy catching the visual regressions, Renovate actually keeping our dependencies up to date, and the pipeline making it all work together as a whole, we have the full system. So hopefully after today, this all feel less optional and easier to approach. Thank you so much. I don't know if you have any questions.
Is there any those questions? We ran a bit over, so of course, if you want to be on time for the keynote, feel free to leave. We're around anyway, but we can take some questions, or you can.
We use Pantheon also in GitLab, similar to your pipeline. Do you ever use the merge from like a multi-dev in Pantheon to go into dev, or do you always go back through your pipeline in GitLab and then let the process work?
Good question. So the question was, do we merge the merge request at the GitLab level, or do we merge from the multi-dev environment directly to the test like dev environment on Pantheon? Yeah.
Pantheon's not as robust.
No, we usually go back to GitLab, we merge, and we produce a new build that we ship, and that's why we treat dev as the first entry point, as the production, basically.
Yeah, it's not another question, but sharing the experience. So I started project with writing unit tests, kernel tests, functional tests, JavaScript tests, and so on, and then ended up with that we don't need this kind of testing. We need only unit tests, unit and kernel mixed tests, and functional tests with browser. Actually, for units and kernel tests, you need PHP unit, and for everything else, Playwright resolve the things. But Playwright is still not integrated with Drupal. So, if you're interested in this, there is an issue to migrate from Nightwatch to Playwright, and you can join them and move the things forward to make it work out of the box for Drupal core and config modules, because it's really a big issue to support this different kind of tests. Yeah, and for unit tests, I have a module test helpers that tries to mix the unit and kernel tests. It provides services that work out of the box. For example, if you want to create entity in the unit test level, it just creates this without any code. So check this out,
yeah.
And really you can narrow down all the tests to mix it kernel plus the unit and Playwright.
Definitely. That's good to know, thanks. I'm not going to be able to repeat all of that, so if you want to go and tell it in the microphone. But the real thing is, like, really make the difference on like the test of Drupal itself and the contribs and the test of your project, because the majority of the work we do is basically aggregating stuff from the community and a little bit of like code that we spark. The real goal of a Drupal developer is to produce as little custom code as possible, so there shouldn't be a lot of code to cover in your own project. If they're lacking the test coverage of contribs, you can provide those tests, it's awesome, but commit it upstream, don't keep it for yourself in your own project, obviously.
And as we mentioned before, you don't need to write every single type of test. You just need to know where in the spectrum your problem is actually located, so that you can write that type of test.
It's also worth noting, this is the Diffy guy. If you want to talk about it, and he's a little shy about self.
Well,
Very exhaustive. If you want to talk Diffy, talk
with this guy. And John's like, that's
I was going to ask a question. Early on, you mentioned git, commit, and pre-commit hooks.
Yeah.
And using those, I didn't know if you had any tools or strategies for a team that's not using them yet to distribute or enforce that in the workflow. So far, I think I found it's all separate. Each person has to do it.
Well, so historically, we've been relying a lot on BLT. So we were reliant on the Git hooks that BLT provides. Now that BLT was phased out, I mean, we replaced that with something we call mini BLT, just was basically the bare bone that we need that's actually not dependent on anything else. And we just keep that pre-commit hook that, like, it's just called BLT validate. And we found that, like, just running those very, like, low-level sanity check on the code before pushing it, it actually resolves, like, a lot of stupid mistakes, basically. But then, like, even if you have a common strategy, like it's like, you know, dash no check, or like it can be circumvented like quite easily. So the real layer of check is on the CI/CD. Anyways, I think it's more provide where we're going more and more, and that's going to be the next step at Evolving Web, is to kind of try to consolidate everything around DDev. And basically move away from like having DDev on the local and then the CI/CD does things differently. What we're going to move is like we're going to also leverage DDev more and more on the CI/CD, so that it's going to be exactly the same we run on both sides. So devs are going to be encouraged to run it locally because it just saves time, but the CI/CD is going to be enforcing it basically.
Just to, like, I had the same problem that you did, and what we did was with our DDev installation configuration, we just had some bash scripts that just, when you set up the project, it puts all the hooks in place. We just had a directory of all the linting steps that we wanted to have. And as long as everyone's pulling from the same thing, and you can crack the whip and make them use DDev.
Cross-platform is another thing that I am going to have to worry about with my team, is getting Windows working the same as our Macs.
I was getting there. It's like when you automate setting up those, like it's great if you have an homogeneous setup for your devs, but once they're kind of ready to pick whatever they want, and your team is growing, it's like, it's a little bit like, yeah, if it runs on Windows or not.
But DDev
Windows,
will-
the Linux subsystem does work. DDev,
Yeah.
maybe with all work.
That works.
I've had problems with it.
Actually, if you use DDF, it doesn't matter, it runs on the Linux container, so it works the same on Mac, Linux, and Windows.
Maybe.
I-
Also,
And
The
if you
Windows.
use
Oh,
VS
yes,
Code,
also.
you can run VS Code directly in the container, so it will run the server side, and all the
Yeah.
tools will be run inside the container, so it doesn't matter at all. And you even can run a virtual machine in the cloud and run local VS Code connected to this cloud machine. So if someone have hard times running the dev locally, we just launch for them virtual machines in the cloud, and they work with their Windows not directly on the machines.
yeah. It's a teammate as a movable object of the whole thing.
Oh, no.
It's to use.
Yeah.
Yeah, one more experience
always
with
worked
test.
for it.
So the easiest start for testing is just to write a smoke test that opens the web page and clicks contact us or something like this in browser. So it's easier to understand for front-end development, back-end developers, for everyone. And if you start with this is already a good point to make the tests grow and check everything else. But the hardest step is the first step, just to start run tests.
And if you have QA resources that are not too afraid of technical stuff, you can teach them how to write playwright
Yeah.
scenarios themselves, and they'll love it at some point.
They
There's a
can
module.
click them, and playwright will create the script for them. So QA can create tests, and developers will extend the tests. So everyone should be there. Usually, developer just writes code, and okay, this is QA problem to cover those tests. And if you force everyone to contribute to tests, this will be a collaboration that's good for everyone.
There was a question over there.
Yeah, most of our silent bugs are related to different browser versions. How do you handle automated testing for multi-browsers?
You might know more than me about that.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think we
The
are
question was
doing
about-
mostly manual. The question was about how do we handle automated testing for multi-browser.
Yeah,
because most of the silent bugs are because of that.
Yeah, mostly because of Safari.
Yeah. So, great question on automated testing. I am not 100% sure if we're doing something specifically on automated testing on cross browsers. I do know we have, and we're using Browser Stack, but that is more like manual stuff. So we use Browser Stack to find like testings in different environments and get it. I think something that we are doing, but I'm not 100% sure on this one. You'll have to test. We do have other script that we run. We created a custom script that actually checks all pages that we pass. Most of the times we're trying with full sitemap, and then it does a diff between the pages on the baseline and the changed version, right? That is run automatically, and I think we are passing like some user agent that fakes, let's say, pretends to be a particular browser. I think that's what we are doing, but I cannot tell you for sure.
What about Diffy? Does Diffy support
Yeah,
multi-browser?
Diffy has support Safari. It's in beta, but it was deployed like maybe 2 months ago, and you can try it out.
We built our own visual regression test framework that we're containerizing in Docker, and we're planning on running that in AWS. And what we found is Chrome seems to have some trouble rendering consistently from test to test. Is that something that anybody else has encountered? Because it uses like more font smoothing, anti-aliasing, stuff like that, so it results in a higher level of diffs than.
We can talk about this for hours.
Yeah.
All right.
Thanks for staying to the very end. I think the next keynote is interesting, and there'll be some AI stuff if you're missing out on that. But yeah, we can also chat later. Come see us at the booth if you have more questions.
Thank you.
Wonderful presentation.